Welcome to today's Explainer. If you've ever felt completely physically exhausted yet strangely wired in the middle of the night, just staring up at the ceiling while your mind runs an absolute marathon, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're exploring the visceral, totally exhausting world of the 2 a.m. brain, and we're diving deep into the hard science of why we overthink. We aren't just going to sit here and talk about feelings, we're going to look at the actual hard neurobiology behind your racing mind. So let's get right to it. You know the exact feeling I'm talking about, right? You're lying in bed, the lights are out, your body is physically drained to the bone, but your brain is just sprinting at full speed. It's simulating endless, highly improbable scenarios. Or maybe it's replaying a minor, throwaway conversation from 6 hours ago. Or even worse, agonizing over an awkward handshake from 5 years ago. And it's analyzing every single word, every micro-expression, the tone of voice. Why won't your brain just shut down so you can get some much-needed rest? Why does it specifically choose the middle of the night to start processing all this junk data? Okay, let's dive into this. Picture your brain as a web browser. You've got, say, 50 tabs open at once, and every single one of them is blasting sound at full volume. You can't figure out where the music is coming from, and you definitely can't hit pause. It is entirely overwhelming. But here's the really good news. You aren't broken. You don't have a defective mind. In fact, you actually possess a highly intelligent, incredibly sensitive radar system. The only problem is that this complex biological system simply lacks an off switch. Now, to fix a problem, we first have to give it the proper clinical name. In psychology, what we casually call overthinking is actually known as maladaptive rumination. This is when your mind gets stuck endlessly chewing over the exact same thought patterns, unchangeable past events, or complex social uncertainties. And the absolute key word here is maladaptive. It doesn't adapt to solve the problem, right? It just loops in circles without any resolution. Reframing this is so absolutely crucial. This isn't a personal weakness. It's not a character flaw. It's an objective, biological mechanism that is just running on overdrive. Let's look under the hood at the anatomical tug-of-war happening inside your skull right now. On one side, we have the prefrontal cortex. Think of this as the logical CEO of your brain. It handles rational decision-making and keeps things nice and orderly. On the other side, we have the default mode network, or DMN. Think of this as a background app that literally never closes. By the time 2 a.m. rolls around, your logical CEO is just fatigued. The prefrontal cortex is exhausted from making decisions all day. And when that logical side clocks out, it loses control, and you get completely swept away by the nonstop internal chatter of the DMN running completely unchecked in the dark. So where does this overactive radar even come from? Well, a lot of it traces back to our shared human biology and evolutionary adaptations. Our ancient ancestors survived by being hypervigilant. Your developing brain learned a highly effective survival strategy early on. Anticipate risks to avoid consequences, and constantly scan for hidden meanings in everyday actions just to protect yourself. Sometimes this instinct gets amplified by unpredictable environments we grew up in, but ultimately, your brain doesn't hate you. It's honestly just trying to keep you safe. It's just doing its job a little too well in modern environments where those ancient literal life or death threats no longer exist. Let's move to and see how this builds. Because honestly, not all overthinking wears the same outfit. It generally splits down two distinct paths. On the left, we have reflective rumination. This is actually a profound strength. It's an inward focus for finding solutions, building emotional intelligence, and deepening self-awareness. It's purposeful. But on the right, we have brooding rumination. These are the passive, destructive loops of regret. This is the toxic downward spiral where we get trapped, replaying problems endlessly without ever actually looking for an exit strategy or a tangible solution. And this brooding state leads to something extremely dangerous, the illusion of mental progress. Your brain tricks you into feeling like you are actively solving a hard problem simply because you are thinking about it so intensely. But in reality, you are just running on a treadmill. You're burning massive amounts of mental and physical energy, basically revving your brain like a roaring Ferrari engine, but the car is stuck in neutral. You aren't moving forward a single inch. You are literally just wearing out the engine. Which leads us to a very frustrating question. Why is it biologically impossible to just stop thinking? We've all had someone tap us on the shoulder when we're visibly stressed and offer that cliché, completely unhelpful advice to just relax, right? Well, the reason it completely fails is because you are fighting against your own hardwired neurobiology. You cannot just command a highly evolved system to shut down with sheer willpower when it has a powerful chemical incentive to stay turned on. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the massive twist hiding in your neurobiology. overthinking is literally driven by a dopamine addiction loop. It happens in 4 specific stages. First, you perceive a threat or an uncertainty in your environment. Second, your brain starts simulating scenarios and arguments to figure out how to survive that threat. Third, and this is the absolute kicker, your brain releases small hits of dopamine. Why? Because from an evolutionary standpoint, the brain evolved to reward us for preparing for danger. It thinks you are problem solving, so it rewards you with a feel-good chemical. Finally, in step 4, you repeat the cycle seeking another hit. Think about it like this. Every time you run a scenario in your head, your brain is actually rewarding itself. Just let that sink in for a moment. Overthinking functions exactly like an addiction loop. Honestly, not much different from mindlessly scrolling on your phone for hours. The more you think, the more you get paid with these tiny chemical hits of dopamine. This is precisely why relying on willpower alone to shut down your racing thoughts is scientifically unrealistic. You are fighting a chemical dependency on your own anxiety. So, how do we escape this cycle if we can't just fight it with willpower alone? Well, the clinical solution isn't about aggressively shutting down your thoughts or forcing your mind to be perfectly, peacefully blank. It is about stopping the fight entirely and changing your fundamental relationship with those thoughts. Instead of seeing them as absolute, undeniable truths, we need to view them as passing data. Let's step out of the exhaustion for a second and look at a couple of actionable psychological tools that top therapists use to help you take back the steering wheel. Our first tool is as simple as adding a few keywords to the start of your sentence. Instead of getting fused with a thought and telling yourself, I am a failure, you take a step back and say, I am having the thought that I am a failure. And this brilliantly illustrates cognitive diffusion. It sounds minor, right? But adding this simple phrase strips the toxic thought of its absolute power over your reality. It creates distance. You are no longer the victim being swept away by the river's current. You suddenly become the observer, just watching the water from the safety of the shore. Next, you have to update your central nervous system's safety signal. Remember, at its core, your brain is still running on those old survival scripts. Logic won't convince it to relax. You actually must use physical, somatic language to prove to your body that there is no predator chasing you right now. Think about what a deep, heavy exhale feels like, or the comforting sensation of a weighted blanket. These physical cues speak directly to your nervous system, signaling that the threat has passed and it is finally safe to rest. So the crucial point is we can take control of this using the 5-4-3-2-1 somatic grounding technique. Let's actually walk through it together real quick. Look around wherever you are right now. Notice 5 things you can clearly see. Then, find 4 things you can physically touch and actually feel their texture. Listen for 3 distinct sounds you can hear in your environment. Identify 2 things you can smell. And finally, 1 thing you can taste. By forcing your default mode network to process real-world sensory data, it cannot simultaneously run that imaginary disaster movie in your head. It instantly hits pause and pulls you right back into the present moment. So I'll leave you with this. Starting today, will you keep drowning in the current of your thoughts, or are you ready to step onto the shore and just watch them flow? You possess a brilliant, highly sensitive, and incredibly capable mind. Your challenge isn't to destroy your sensitivity or to go to war with your own biology, but to become a patient, compassionate guide for your own brain. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope this helps you find a little more peace tonight.